Okay, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Meet the Candidates event for the Democratic primary for Assembly District 107. Both potential candidates were invited, and they're here, as you can see. This event was organized and it's being moderated by the League of Women Voters of Saratoga County. This event is being recorded, and it's going to be posted on the League of Women Voters YouTube channel. And the link will be posted on our website, LWVSaratoga.org. League rules require that if a Meet the Candidates event is recorded, it must be broadcast or rebroadcast in its entirety. With that in mind, we ask audience members to refrain from filming any portion of tonight's event. My name is Barbara Thomas. I'm a member of the League of Women Voters of Saratoga County. I live in Saratoga County, and I will be your moderator. The League of Women Voters of Saratoga County is a nonpartisan, volunteer political organization dedicated to the informed and responsible participation of citizens in government. The League never supports or opposes any political party or candidate. That has been the League policy since 1920, when the League was formed from the suffrage movement. Membership is open to anyone who is eligible to register and vote. So please consider joining, actually, your local league if you're in Rensselaer County or Albany County or Saratoga County. For Washington County, I think Saratoga County would be the place. I would like to thank the Cambridge United Presbyterian Church for use of the Bryman Community Center this evening, and the Washington County Democrats and the AD 107 Town Democratic Committees for inviting us. I also thank you, the audience, for attending and watching. I realize that many of you have very strong opinions about the issues that will be discussed tonight. However, I will insist that the candidates and the audience treat each other with respect. Please refrain from cheering, applauding, making comments, or otherwise interrupting the proceedings. We have two candidates this evening for one available Democratic candidacy for the State Assembly from the 107th District. We have received questions from the public in advance. These were reviewed by League members, and questions were selected to be representative and to avoid redundancy. Questions of a personal nature were not included. And I would mention that none of the candidates has had access to the questions ahead of time. And candidates, this is your opportunity to let voters know your stance on these topics and how you will address the issues facing your district. Please do not waste valuable time tearing down or labeling your opponent. Deal with the facts, and in your closing statement, please do not put your opponents on the spot with no chance to reply. We have two timers for this evening's event. Signs will be held up for the candidates to glance at. Green means 1 minute left, yellow means 30 seconds left, and red means that your time is up. If you don't stop, a bell will ring. The names of the two potential candidates in alphabetical order are Corey Pierce and Kent Soppes. Now it is time to hear their 2-minute opening statements. And they have drawn lots, and Kent is going to go first.
Thank you, everybody. I want to thank the League of Women Voters of Washington County and Saratoga County for hosting this. And for all of you coming out tonight on a Friday night, kind of stormy. I know the Balloon Festival is starting, so I really appreciate that. My impetus to run for Assembly is really simple. I think we need elected officials who are responsive and who are accountable and who actually put in the work. I don't believe that right now in the 107th Assembly District we have that. What we don't need are people who treat the office like a photo op and just go to business openings and not engage on the issues that are important. And we're facing a lot of big issues right now. Climate change, reproductive health attacks, attacks on democracy. These are not small things, and this district deserves somebody who's at the table to represent them and to work hard on their behalf. I also believe that a role of a legislator isn't just to say, well, talk about the big issues. There's a day-to-day job that has to be done. And that entails working with the towns and the not-for-profits and the schools and the churches in the whole district to find out what the needs are, whether it's Republican or Democratic town. The needs are real. The needs, if I were elected, would be those of my constituents regardless of where they are or where they live. As a member of the New York Assembly, I will work with all stakeholders to create public policy that ensures a green agenda that doesn't leave anybody behind, that protects reproductive rights and access, addresses poverty and hunger, and promotes early education. I have the support and endorsement of those who know me best. Democratic committees, Pat Fahey, Capital Women, and Planned Parenthood. I have proven I will do the work and be a strong advocate for progressive issues. Thank you again.
Thank you. And now Chloe's turn.
I just want to echo Ken's sentiments and thanks to the League for hosting and their work with this event and beyond. I so appreciate any effort to promote democracy and increase access to voting and participation. In fact, last month I went to the Rensselaer County Board of Elections to advocate against the significant closure of polling sites for this race in an effort to protect democracy and voter access. And the League, of course, supported that effort as well. So again, thank you for all that you do. And thank you to everyone here tonight. Again, my name is Chloe Pierce, and I am a proud Democrat, a proud lifelong Capital Region resident, and I am so proud to be running in Assembly District 107. This district in particular is so important to me and feels particularly special because all 4 counties are areas myself or my family have called home for generations. I'm born and raised in Albany County. My dad's born and raised Rensselaer County. I have family in Columbia County, and my mom was born and raised right here in Washington County. I know these communities, I know these people and these issue areas, and I know that I'm the right person to bring us the real change we need and the representation that we deserve. Beyond that, I know what it takes to do the job. I work with legislators every single day, and I know firsthand what makes a successful champion in our state government. I can hit the ground running on day 1 and deliver real results. I have the experience, personally and professionally, to be a successful assembly member, and the knowledge and background in the issue areas we care about most. I currently work as an advocate for nonprofits, representing the New York State nurses, spaces in education, child welfare, clean energy, substance abuse disorder treatment, and issues of equity, meaning I have the tools, resources, and understanding on things we all care about to really get the job done as an assembly member. I don't compromise my morals for a paycheck, and I am proud of the work I do every single day to deliver already real positive change for our communities. And I'm so excited and so humbled by the opportunity to potentially continue that work as your next assembly member. And the support that I've received from the communities as well as current electeds, including Assemblymember Phil Steck, and organizations including Working Families Party, Eleanor's Legacy, LPAC, LGBTQ+ Victory Fund, Run for Something, Albany County Young Dems, and the 100% rating of Planned Parenthood has really helped push me through these final weeks, and I am so excited to get across the finish line. Thank you.
Okay, the first question that we will have for tonight, and I will say that the candidates have 1.5 minutes to answer each question, and they have the red cards if they need to extend their answer by a minute. And they only get 2 of those. And the first question goes to Kent. Why do you want to run for the New York State Assembly?
I want to run because I have grown up watching government. I've worked in government for over 20 years. I grew up around it, and I've developed a sense of what works and what doesn't work. And I see people not try. I see people take this position of legislator for granted, and it bothers scares me. I think that when I've gone around to the doors, I've been on hundreds of doors throughout the district, we have a very unique district. However, there's a lot of commonality there. There's a lot of people there just trying to live their lives, trying to do what's best for their family, and try to get through the day. And they're looking to government for just a little bit of clarity and a little bit of leadership, and we don't have that right now. We have a real severe lack of leadership, and I don't want to sit on the sidelines while this continues. So, like I said before, there are a lot of big ideas I think I can engage on and lead on, but there's also a lot of just day-to-day showing up and showing you care that's important. And I don't see that from many people in the legislature these days. Thank you.
I think one of the things we're going to run into having two Dems running for the seat is we're going to have some similar answers because I echo your sentiments as well. I grew up in government. I've been very fortunate to have the mother that I did that works in the state legislature now, and I grew up experiencing campaigns and seeing what it takes to be a legislator, and now professionally spending the last decade in government affairs as well. I know what it takes to be a good legislator, and I know what I can do to deliver for these communities that, like I said, I've spent my whole life in and that I deeply care about and am familiar with. And I agree, we don't have the representation that we deserve or we need. Scott Vendette does not show up. He does not deliver for our communities, and we need someone that can really make that effective, positive change. And I have the experience to do it. And I care about these communities, and I am, I'm feeling very strongly about what I can deliver for these communities as well.
Thank you. Okay, the next question is, if elected, how will you communicate with your constituents, and how will you represent constituents who do not share your views? And Chloe's going to answer that one first.
Okay.
So one of the things that I really enjoy about my job now is the conversations that we have with people in all walks of life, all political parties, and the access to experts that I have, that I will bring to this community. I'm a big fan of town halls. I'm a big fan of settings like this where we can talk and I can really get to know everyone in the community. They can get to know me. I can bring the experts to the table, and you don't have to just take my word for it and say, oh, Chloe's saying this must be it. I will bring the experts to you. We'll have conversations. We'll have open dialogue and also transparency. I'm a big believer in transparency and being upfront and honest with constituents and making sure that all the information is available to you, and so that you know that I'm making informed decisions when it comes time to vote in the legislature. I'm also, I think voter contact and constituent contact is a major piece of this. You are put in the legislature to represent your communities, so you have to be in those communities. You have to show up. I know in Hoosick Falls and Rensselaer County, when they had their issue with the water contamination, the biggest complaint that they had was no one showed up. No one felt like they were heard, like they cared, if their representation cared, and I will do the complete opposite. I will show up. I will make sure that we have a voice at the table and in the decision-making process, and that's something that you can consistently count on with me.
Okay, and Kit, yes.
No, I agree. I think town hall meetings like this are fantastic. And part of the job is showing up to all the towns throughout the district, and not just the ones where you're from or the ones you favor, the ones that, or the more politically in line with what you believe. In my 20 years, I've worked with representatives from the left, middle, and right in the legislature, at DOT, my current position, small businesses. I'm not afraid to talk to someone and have them say, well, no way, I'm not with you. It's important to have that conversation. It's something I've dedicated myself to. It's something I know how to do. I was town chair in the town of Athens in Greene County, which is a deep, deep red county. And I was Democrat chair, and we started to win because we started talking to independents and Republicans. And we put together a team that cut across the aisle, that didn't just say, this is our way or the highway. Criticism I have of the Democratic Party right now is sometimes they do not articulate their policies very well to independents and more moderate folks, and we need to fix that, especially in the 107.
Okay, thank you. And then the next question, and it goes to Kent, is what are your top legislative priorities?
The comptroller released a report a couple weeks ago that identified child poverty in New York State. In the 107th district, the 4 counties that comprise this district, the average is about 15% of children are impoverished and hungry. Now that number is lower, or is higher in real life when you consider the fact that some of the poverty statistics are based on just severely low household income numbers. We also need greater access to health and mental health services. I have myself experienced the scourge of addiction. I've been sober almost 6 years. I know how hard it is to do that. I promised myself if I got into a position where I could help people, I would do that. I plan on doing that as well. But we also need, in the concept, in the overall arching green economy transition, we need to invest in infrastructure, transportation, water, wastewater, and keep in mind how those changes can create jobs and invest in the economy. So those are the top 3 issues that I would be focusing on if I were elected.
Thank you. And I forgot to say to both of the candidates, if you ever need a question repeated, please ask.
Okay, thanks, Barb. So I think one of the awesome things about this district is that it is so unique and diverse, and there is a lot of issue area and ground to cover, but there is commonality, like Kent had mentioned. So some of the core issues that I hear from our communities and I have experienced on doors is, affordability. We're seeing that across the state. It is not unique to our communities, and that's affordable housing, education, transportation, and in the education space, I personally have advocated for universal school meals, which is free breakfast and lunch for all students, regardless of income, to remove that stigma, and that is something that I would continue to champion as a legislator in terms of affordability. Also, healthcare. We need to support our nurses. We need to make healthcare, quality healthcare, more affordable, more accessible, and that also involves the transportation aspect as well, because people need means to get to that healthcare. And when we have some more rural communities like we do in this district, that's a really important aspect. Also, the economy. We need to invest in our economy, small businesses, and also the transition over to clean energy and building that clean economy and creating jobs in that aspect. Those are just some of the top 3. I could go on and on, Barb, but I will stop there.
Okay. And now, the next question also goes to Chloe. How do we balance the needs for large solar farms with community concerns, such as not in my backyard, and maintaining farmland? What role should the local community play in making those decisions?
I love that question, and I could talk clean energy all day. That is something that I do very frequently with my current job, and one of the things that I've noticed the most with that is a lot of it comes down to kind of popping that misinformation bubble. The transition to clean energy, I think we all know that we need to support, but it's scary. Change can be scary, especially when the conversation involves perhaps, the fear of losing farmland and agriculture reduction, crop reduction. But in this aspect, I think one of the things that we should really consider and tap into is clean energy, specifically solar, in areas that are already developed. So there's communities across the state that are using land that has already been developed, whether it be a parking lot, flat roofs, or other spaces that's not being utilized to then put solar, so we don't even have to worry about taking farmland, because that's the last thing that we want to do is have farms close. So I think that is a major piece of the conversation that we need to consider, and also know that the towns benefit from that, because they get that lease payment that these solar companies are paying to the municipality, and then they can use that to invest in their economy, invest in the communities. So I think that's an important piece, and then also knowing that in some instances, farms may be at risk of closure if they don't find a second line of income. And sometimes solar can be that lifeline for these farmers that would have to shut down anyway. And we need to make sure that farmers are involved in the decision-making process when it comes to this, and they have a seat at the table, and I would make sure to do that.
Thank you. Kent?
I've got this question often in this district because agriculture is such a huge part of the economy here. I would support a statewide master plan on solar. I think we need someone to take the lead, working with all the towns throughout the state, going through the zoning issues, going through the planning issues, going through the local laws, and come up with an actual plan, as opposed to the piecemeal way we've been doing this throughout the state. I think also there's a ton of land that's not used, that the state owns, that could be invested for solar farms. There's brownfields that can be used. There's the Thruway has massive tracts of land, but the statewide solar mapping is something I want to spend some time working on if I were elected. I think that's the way to go right now. Understanding that, the state coming in and saying, well, now this is what we're going to do is not what I'm talking about. It's working collaboratively, working with the Association of Towns, the Association of Counties, the Association of Mayors, and really coming up with an aggressive statewide plan that is data driven.
Okay, thank you very much. Now, the next question, of course, goes to you, and it's, do you support the proposed New York Equal Rights Amendment?
Of course I do. I think it's horrible what happened with the courts pulling that off. I'm hopeful that an appeal will win. If it doesn't, it highlights the fact why races in the 107th are vital to elect a Democrat. We need, people say we're in New York, you're safe, blue states don't have to worry about it. Not true at all. I was on the board of Planned Parenthood for Upper Hudson Planned Parenthood for 5 years. Started before Trump, during Trump, and it was scary. And the thing that we talked about every time was you can't get complacent in New York. So should the ERA not be restored, we'll have to vote for that again next year. My vote is 100% yes. Planned Parenthood has endorsed me. They know that I'm someone who will die on this hill time and time again. And the thing about this issue, it's sometimes framed as a woman's only issue. It is not a woman's only issue. It's a men and family issue. And by framing it only as a woman issue, you let men off the hook. I've put in the work. I will not let myself be off the hook, and I expect people to demand that I show up on this issue, and I will. But yes, I support the ERA.
I absolutely support the ERA. Again, I feel a similar frustration to Kent to have the court challenge and see that may not be on the ballot come November. And as the only woman in this race, it feels particularly important for me to speak on it, just because we don't have enough female representation in government, and that's exactly why I'm running. We need younger, more progressive women to run and make sure that we have strong advocates fighting for the ERA. And Kent's right, it's not just a female issue, but as a woman and talking about things that have to do with reproductive freedoms, and as the only person with a uterus in this race, again, this is something that is particularly important to me, and is, again, why I'm running. I have friends that have young daughters, and I want to be an example to them that they know that they have someone fighting for them, and that when it comes their turn to perhaps run for office or to have some equality in the workplace, that they can do that. They can do anything that they set their minds to, and they have the work of people like me leading the way for them and raising them up, so it's easier for them when it comes their turn. So yes, absolutely, I would support the ERA and anything to do in that vein.
Thank you. And now you get the next question too, which is the 2022 Environmental Bond Act offers to fund various environmental and community projects. What type of projects would you support?
That's a great question. Sorry, that is a great question. I think that we need a wide range of environmental projects that spans across clean water, preserving clean water, making sure that everyone has access to clean water, like I said earlier with Hoosick Falls and water contamination, and that's not unique to Hoosick Falls. Bethlehem, where we both are, has had issues with water contamination, and we need to step up as a state and do that. Hoosick Falls is still struggling, and it's been quite some time, so we need to invest in clean energy, land conservation, making sure that we're preserving the environment for future generations, and doing things in terms of air pollution. There's anything that you can think of in terms of environmental protection, I think that we should really pursue, because we are at the precipice and at a point of no return when it comes to climate change if we haven't already started going on the other side of that. We need to step up and make some major investments as a state, because we need to protect our environment for future generations to come, and we don't have strong enough, progressive enough leadership in that space, but I would be that champion.
Thank you. Ken?
No, I agree. I think the problem with the Bond Act and environmental spending is it's not enough. When I was in the Senate, when I worked in the Senate, we investigated my boss was chairman of the investigations committee. There was brown water in Nassau, reports of brown water, and the Western Nassau Water Authority said, no, don't worry about it, it's nothing. So of course we investigated it. And we had people sending us brown water, and the authority kept saying, no, it's nothing, don't worry about it. That taught me all I need to know. An assembly member has to be the advocate. You can't trust some of these other folks to operate. So I think I would support strong water, wastewater spending throughout the district. But like I said before, this spending doesn't have to just be for projects. This can be a community effort. This can be something that builds the economy. This doesn't have to be an us versus them situation like a lot of the green transition has become. The other thing that I would focus on, and it's not in the Environmental Bond Act, but the transit funding in the state, billions and billions of dollars. I think we need to take a look at that and find a way to use it in a smarter way to promote public transit programs in the district as well.
Thank you. Okay, the next question goes to Kent, and it is, do you support medical aid in dying? Legislation that would allow a mentally competent adult who is within 6 months of death to request a prescription from a physician in order to end his or her life if suffering becomes unbearable?
I think like choice and other medical issues, that is between the doctor and their family and the patient, and oftentimes just the doctor and the patient. Yes, I would support that bill if I were in the legislature. I know my opponent here has done a lot of work on that issue, and I respect that. I think that's a good bill. I think that, from what I understand, it's not going to go anywhere this year, but should I be elected, that's an issue that I would definitely engage on and support, understanding how very sensitive it is. But that is a choice that people need to make, and it's something that I wouldn't feel comfortable voting against.
And Chloe?
I may have to use a red card for this one, I have a lot to say. So I currently represent Compassionate Choices, which is a nonprofit that deals with end-of-life options across the board, not just medical aid in dying. But I am a very, very, very strong advocate for medical aid in dying. It is essentially another form of bodily autonomy, just in a different way, a different phase in your life. These are people that have 6 months or less left to live. They are going to die anyway. Why should they have to suffer? Why should any of us have to suffer? Death is inevitable, suffering is not. So medical aid in dying, I would wholeheartedly support. I already work very hard on it, and I would be a very strong champion for this. It's, again, like I said, another form of bodily autonomy, and similar to an abortion, if you don't want to use medical aid in dying, don't use it. It's just another tool in the end-of-life toolbox that we can use, because hospice is fantastic and does a lot of great services, but sometimes it's not enough. And for me personally, having watched my 2 grandmothers pass away in front of me, one of them incredibly suffering, and I saw firsthand that hospice wasn't enough for her, I would love to make sure that other people don't go through that experience and people can die with dignity, and this bill would do just that.
Thank you. Okay, and the next question goes to Chloe too. What is the likely impact of climate change on the Assembly District 107 counties? Do you foresee changes in population, environment, or business?
Yeah, I think we will see the impacts of climate change across the board. It's not unique to Assembly District 107. I think that Assembly District 107 actually has a lot of unique opportunity to make a difference in that space. We do have a lot of land that we can tap into for whether that be solar projects, wind projects, programs like agrivoltaics, which I work very closely with Assemblymember Kellis, who's based in Ithaca, on that currently, and that is a combination of agriculture and farmland with clean energy projects. So whether that be raised solar panels, so that way livestock can graze around it, you can still put crops there. There's ways that we can incorporate both agriculture and clean energy, and I think Assembly District 107 is poised to make significant strides against the climate crisis because of some of the beautiful things that we have in this district, including all of the agriculture and rural spaces. But I think that we all as a state will see the negative impacts of climate change, whether that be outmigration or just things of that nature. But I think that we actually have an incredible opportunity to make great strides in that area.
Thank you.
The great thing about this district is where it's situated. We touch the Adirondacks, we touch the Hudson River, the Berkshires. It's a beautiful district. The impact on climate change will absolutely be in the agriculture sector, the health sector, the mental health sector. These are things that we have to consider beyond just the climate. There's the actual social impacts, I think, that will be very problematic in this district. We already have high poverty rate. We already have people trying to make ends meet. And if there are storms that are continuing to be violent, if there's changes in the water, changes in the atmosphere that impact people's health, that's just going to make it a lot worse. So when people talk about climate, I think they think, well, it's just about the environment. It's not. It's about everything. It's about from everybody's from all aspects of everyone's life, this will be impacted. And so I think clearly there's a lot of work we have to do. We can be proactive, and that's I think what we're trying to do here is to get in the assembly to add our voice to that.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, the next question will go to you, Kent, and it is, New York State cap and invest funds will be available for various projects such as energy efficiency for low-income individuals and carbon-neutral building. Will you publicize the current programs, and what other programs and funding should be available for Assembly District 107?
Yes, I will publicize those programs. I think Cap and Invest has been discussed for many years, and I am a supporter of that concept. I think it's important that we get the funding to where it's supposed to be. So like I said at the beginning of this forum, as an assembly member, I will engage with the towns and with the not-for-profits to make sure that the funding that's available gets to the right groups. In terms of other funding, is it other environmental funding, or is it just general funding?
Yeah.
Other grant programs? Okay.
You know these questions.
That's okay. We need
People in the community who sent them in, so.
we need funding for not-for-profits. So I was at a meeting the other night. The Arc of Rensselaer County is starting to have a food bank for its employees because the employees aren't paid enough. That's the kind of funding we need to inject into this district for caregivers, for health caregivers, for mental health caregivers. We need funding increase for schools. Next year, the governor has said foundation aid is on the table. She tried it this year, huge pushback. She's going to do it again next year. So we need to elect somebody who has the experience, who's okay being in these big battles and has done it before, because the funding, as you know, is cyclical. So governors will sometimes say, well, we don't have funding, we're poor, and then pull everything back, and it's always on the backs of working class people.
Barb, can you repeat the question, please?
Sure. I could if I was. Had it right here in front of me, but I shuffled my papers. Okay, it's, New York State cap and invest funds will be available for various projects, such as energy efficiency for low-income individuals and carbon neutral building. How will you publicize the current programs? And what other programs and funding should be available for the district?
Thank you. Yes, so I agree with the publication of the Cap and Invest programs. I think transparency is something that we're lacking statewide in terms of our government, but specifically in this district. So I'm wholeheartedly in support of any effort to increase transparency, as well as to increase clean energy projects, energy efficiency, make sure that our utilities are affordable for everyone. It shouldn't matter where you live or your socioeconomic status. We need to make sure as we transition to clean energy that everyone has access and it's affordable to all of our communities. And also make sure that, like Ken mentioned, the funding goes where it's supposed to. We know how slow government can work. We know how often there are stalemates and there's problems there. So to really have champions in the legislature pushing to make sure that money shows up and shows up where it's supposed to is important. And then I agree, we often hear that there's not enough money in the budget, and there's too many great programs that there's not enough money for. So I think that we need to look at other programs that increase revenue raisers, such as the Superfund Act, which would make polluters pay. The highest percentage polluters would have to pay and invest money into programs that would aid in clean energy projects that would directly impact and benefit our communities. And I agree with nonprofit financing and grant money. And that way, like I said, I worked on universal school meals, and that was something that we didn't get a single dollar for in this budget, and it was less than 0.1% of the budget to make it fully universal for every student in the state, and that would be a cost savings to our families. So investing in that.
You could use your red card.
No, that's all right, Barb, I'll save it.
Okay, the next question does go to you, though. What will you do to bring more jobs into the district, specifically green jobs?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think as we transition into a more clean energy-based community, we will have more jobs in that space. And like I said before, we have a lot of untapped potential in our communities in Assembly District 107 in terms of creating clean energy projects, whether that be people from GE who are making the actual wind turbines, and the people that deliver them to our communities, and the people that set them up, and the farmers that work on the space in conjunction with them if we do programs like agrivoltaics. But beyond just clean energy jobs, we need to just bring jobs to our community. We need to support our businesses. And one of the ways that we can do that is addressing some of the root causes of outmigration, or why people can't stay in this area, whether it be affordability, making sure we increase access to affordable broadband, reliable broadband, increasing cellular service. Because if we want to tap into a lot of the spaces now that have remote jobs and people that can work fully from home, if we want them to be in our communities, they need to have internet, and they need to have reliable cell service. So I think really addressing some of the root causes of why people aren't staying in our communities will help naturally create more jobs in that space as well.
Thank you. Okay, Ken.
I think it's a multi-pronged effort here. I think with the green jobs, clearly there's going to be, if done correctly, a lot of investment, a lot of opportunity, and like we both said, you got to get the funding to where it's supposed to be, and it needs to be correct. But when you talk about the big manufacturing jobs coming in, yes, that's great. But there's other down economies. We have to invest in small businesses. And I represent small businesses, and I am a Democrat who does not believe businesses is a four-letter word. I think businesses create jobs. Yes, businesses sometimes need to be reminded that they need to invest in their employees, and increase minimum wage increases are important, and I support that as well. But we need to make sure that the jobs are there, that the wages are correct, and that the state doesn't forget that there are other down economies connected to the larger green transition.
Okay, thank you very much. And the next question, of course, goes to you, Ken. Some school districts' enrollments are decreasing. How can you keep foundation aid in our community And are there other funding options?
No, I think that as the governor said, it's all on the table, and what she means by that, I don't know. But that's something that we would immediately make a priority, is to engage on that. I've already started talking to people in that space to try to get a better sense of what the needs would be for our districts. And that's what actually makes this election very important for this particular assembly seat. We need a Democrat, we need a majority member in on these conversations. The Republican will, one, not engage, and even if he could. Two, he's just not going to be there. And so we need somebody who is interested and who has curiosity and can actually ask the right questions, and that's something I plan on doing.
Thank you. Chloe?
I work a lot in the education space currently, whether that be, like I said, with Universal School Meals or other nonprofits that touch in education. And I also work in a bipartisan fashion on that, very closely with the ranker on education and assembly as well. And this is not a Democrat issue, it's not a Republican issue, this is just a human issue. We all care about our kids. We all want to see our kids succeed, and we all want to see our teachers supported as well. And I think that we need to make major investments in education and make sure that that money comes to our communities as well. And we need, like Ken said, we need a Democrat to fight and deliver for our communities. Scott can't bring the dollars to our communities the way that a Democrat can. And I have a lot of experience in that space, and I know what we need to have in terms of a champion at that decision-making table. And I would fight to make sure that we get every single dollar that we deserve and then some, because kids are our future, and we need to invest in them. And I think oftentimes we see people are too hesitant to really spend that money up front and really make those strong investments, even though we know that it pays dividends on the back end. So I would fight for increased funding for education across the board.
Thank you. Okay, and Ken? Oh, wait, Chloe, excuse. Very strange, my grid is out of whack. All right, do you believe that tobacco use is a serious health issue in New York State? Do you believe that flavored tobacco entices children to vape? If so, what's the solution?
Yeah, so I think that we have seen very, very continuously that tobacco use is on the rise, particularly with children. May 31st was just World No Tobacco Day, and the theme of World No Tobacco Day was protecting our children and decreasing access to tobacco products, specifically ones that are targeted to them, which would be vape products, flavored tobacco, as well as menthol. We know that menthol cigarettes are smoked by new smokers because of the cooling effect, and then also it specifically targets our communities of color as well. And I think too often we see the tobacco industry puts profits over people, and I think the amount of money that they spend on advertising, particularly to engage younger smokers, is abhorrent. And I think that we need to pass a menthol ban. I think that we need to increase the tax on cigarette sales and discourage the use of tobacco products, especially because we see how much it costs our healthcare system as well. So this is a multi-pronged issue. It's not just about the tobacco itself, it's about all of the repercussions that come from it. And anything that targets our children, I'm not going to support. We need to make sure we keep our kids safe and healthy. And the amount of money that tobacco puts into that industry, it just it has to be stopped.
Thank you. Ken?
Yes, clearly tobacco is very bad for everybody. To talk about the menthol ban, I opposed the menthol ban as president of the Convenience Store Association. We were successful in removing that from the budget. As a candidate, I would still oppose the menthol ban for this reason. The vape ban, the flavored vape ban that we have in this state has been a complete failure. It's not enforced. The kids are vaping at a rate that's been unheard of. I've been trying to work on an enforcement bill in the legislature with advocates and with retailers to try to get these stores, not my stores, to stop selling these products. Right now, the Department of Health can go into a store and see that you're selling an illegal product. They'll write you a fine, but they won't take that product away. If I were elected, that's the first bill I write, is a real confiscation bill The enforcement needs to come with the ban. When we get the enforcement done, then we can have the menthol ban. But until we do that, it's just gonna create more havoc. I have worked with retailers who sell tobacco, and it's something that my stores do. However, I have the support of the Chief of Staff, the Department of Health, the former Executive Deputy Commissioner of the Department of Health, top staff in the Assembly and Senate Health Committees, and the lobbyists for tobacco-free kids. This says that they know that I'm a sincere advocate in this space, and that's something I will do if I'm elected as well.
Thank you. And the next question, Kent, is how can we provide more affordable housing options for our communities? Can the Assembly foster creative housing solutions, such as retrofitting abandoned buildings?
Yeah, no, I think that's a great idea. I think the Assembly and the Senate have a bill right now. I think Senator Hinchy and Assemblywoman Fahey have a bill that would take stock of the temporary short-term housing rentals that are in the district, in the state, so that areas and counties and towns can have a better understanding of what they're working with. There are a ton of abandoned buildings, a ton of buildings falling down. I think that would be prime for investment. You take some of the bond funding or similar kind of funding and invest in green rehabilitation throughout the district. It would create jobs, and it would help with the housing crisis. I think with housing, what I've seen from the legislature has been, I feel that they are sincerely trying to fix this issue. I know the governor had pushed something last year, but this year I think the legislature, like I said, led by Hinchy and Fahey, are starting to really come up with ideas. So I think it's something you have to try to think outside the box. Again, the theme that we're all talking about here is working with the communities, working with the district, and not just forcing a top-down solution on things that might not work.
Thank you. Chloe?
I think, the governor has touted this year's budget as, the first time that we've had such major strides and investments in housing, but it doesn't go far enough. We are still facing a major housing crisis and an affordability crisis across the board. So we need someone who's going to have creative solutions and that also has lived experience in that space. As a young person who would love to be able to buy a home, it is becoming increasingly unaffordable and feels somewhat unattainable. And that is something that I feel a lot of people are facing, and it's not just the ability to buy a home, rent an apartment, and we need to address the root causes of, the lack of ability to maintain our life in these communities, and we need to incentivize people to come to these communities and stay in these communities, and that needs to be, like we mentioned before, broadband access, cell service, things like that encourage people to come to these areas and invest in our communities, but we need to make sure that they can afford it. So we need to increase our affordable housing and incentivize programs that go toward first-time home buyers, go toward the revitalization of buildings and communities that will also create new jobs. So there's a lot that can be done in that space, and like I said, what has been done has been great, and we've seen the benefits of it, but it doesn't go far enough.
Thank you. Okay, and Chloe, does Washington County have adequate resources to treat substance abuse addictions? If not, what options are available to support the community?
That's a great question. I think across the state, especially in our more rural communities, like we have here in Washington County, there is not nearly enough opportunity and availability of addiction treatment providers. One of the organizations I represent is the Addiction Treatment Providers Association, and we've been advocating for a multitude of bills that would address the inavailability of these services. One of them is related to the cost. We know a lot of times people don't seek help in this space because of the cost. So we introduced a bill that would have parity to something similar that for copays that a pregnant person would have, where their copays are capped at a certain amount, and this would be similar for episodic treatment, with up to about 60 treatments, and it would make it so someone who is getting that treatment has a cap on how much it costs. for them to use those services. And I think that we need more bills like that to make it more affordable, and that would allow other service providers to come to the area and really help with that, because we see across the board that there's increases in substance abuse disorder, whether that be opioids, alcohol, and people are fentanyl, right? And we are not getting the support that we need, and we need champions in the legislature to make sure that it's affordable, it's accessible, and it's expanded across the state.
Kent?
No, I agree with all that. I think, no, the answer is no, there's not enough resources in Washington County or the rest of the district. Part of the problem with this addiction is people, even when they're ready to reach out for help, if they're rebuffed, they may not come back for help. We need to figure out how to, when someone first reaches out, capture that, and whether that's lowering or capping services, but some people don't have that insurance. So what we need to figure out is how to get them into the system and provide granting and state funding for that. The issue that I found when I was trying to seek help was people were busy. There were places that they could have been responsive, but there weren't enough providers. So we need to work on that. We need to get education scholarships and grants to service providers for addiction services. And again, I think just talking about it, I think people in our generation have become more comfortable talking about this issue, and I think that being out there in the community, talking about it, sharing my story, will say to people, it's okay to be this, like, to have this, so maybe I can get some help. And that really does go a long way.
Okay, thank you very much. So the next question goes to you, Kent, and it is, costs of farming, including land, machinery, and labor costs, have increased. How do you make farming attractive for young families?
Well, I think the legislature needs to pass that clarification for the overtime tax credit bill. There are a few farms that have talked to me throughout the district who have said that they, because of how they file their taxes, because of how they pay their employees, they will not benefit from the overtime employee tax credit. I believe the legislature is working on it. I don't know if it's passed as of tonight, but I know that both agriculture chairs were pushing that. What we need to do is try to, I think, bring farmers together throughout the state and try to collaborate more on equipment that might be someone might not need in this part of the state, but someone needs in the other part of the state. I think, again, communication and understanding what the real needs are is the first step to fixing that problem.
One of the bills that I've worked on this session and actually just passed both houses yesterday and hopefully will be signed by the governor is called the Good Food New York bill. And what it does is really incentivize our local farmers, and I think that we need to continue to do that across the board with creative solutions to make it so that our local farmers, their products are used in a multitude of ways, whether that be sold in grocery stores or in this instance, it's a food procurement law. So what it does is changes general municipal law to allow public institutions to have choice. So currently you have to go with lowest bidder no matter what, whether it be a public school, a prison, a nursing home, whatever it may be, they have to go with the lowest bidder, and there's no transparency, so they could be getting their food from across the country, and that's not incentivizing our local farmers. This bill allows 10% wiggle room for these purchasers to be able to incentivize our local farms. That's one of the key pieces, and also to prioritize minority and women-owned businesses, as well as food producers that have animal welfare values that align with the public institution. So I think passing more laws like that and really incentivizing our local farmers will make it so there's a natural growth in the farming industry, as well as looking for other creative solutions in terms of grant programs and incentivization to make it so farming is affordable, because New York is continuously being looked on as one of the country's next biggest food producers, and we need to make sure that we make it affordable for people to do that.
Okay. And Chloe, this next question goes to you. How can New York State encourage farmers to employ practices that reduce carbon emissions, and by doing so, help the state reach its goal of carbon neutrality?
That's a great question. In some of my work, I have looked at what other states have done in that space. There's a few other states, surrounding states, I think Vermont is one of the closest, that incentivize farmers to do just that through grant programs, and to really look at the benefits of transitioning over to regenerative farming, clean farming, and we need that key aspect to meet our clean energy goals. So I think that our state needs to come up with creative solutions like that, whether that be a line item in the budget with a pot of money that's first come, first serve, for people to use that money to help pay for the cost of switching over to clean farming. But we need to have creative solutions in that space, and really encourage our small mom and pop farms to do that as well, because every little bit helps. And like I said, if we don't get creative and we don't focus on all the different aspects of clean energy, we won't meet our clean energy goals, and we won't fight back against climate change.
Nick?
I think we have to ask the farmers and the agriculture industry what they can manage, what they can do, as opposed to telling them this is how you're going to do it. Just like all the other green proposals, they're great, I support them, but we have to follow through and to force farms, force agriculture industry into a space that might not make sense at this time, either economically or technologically. That's something that we really have to take into account before we pass a statewide mandate or whatnot. Making grants available, fantastic. Working with them, trying to bring them together with other farmers in other states, that's great too. But I would hesitate to pass a law that would force farmers into a position that they're not ready yet to attain.
Okay, sorry about that. Okay, the next question is, I don't know how this is. How can New York prepare for weather emergencies?
When I was in the assembly, we worked on a report that was very similar to this. This was before Sandy, and it was very scary how, when Sandy happened, how everything we said would happen would happen. In addition to things like going all electric and getting off natural gas, we have to harden our infrastructure. We have to work with coastal communities, which, there are some towns who are right on the river, that we have to make sure that wastewater systems are intact and safe in case there's major flooding, and we have to ensure that when houses are destroyed, as mine was in a tree collapse a few years ago, that insurance companies don't screw over the residents and the homeowners. Those are the things I think that a legislator can do and be mindful of. It's important that during any crisis, there's no gouging, there's no taking advantage of, and I think that's the big thing to be mindful of. But we have to harden our infrastructure, we have to have emergency planning, we have to coordinate that with towns and counties.
Thank you. Chloe?
Yeah, so I think that we need to invest in infrastructure, like Ken said. That's a major piece of disaster preparedness. And as we see with climate change, we are having more and more instances of severe weather, and that's not going to stop unless we make significant changes in the clean energy space. So I think that's one piece of the puzzle, and investing in strengthening our infrastructure is another, as well as I think one of the untapped things that the legislature doesn't really fully take advantage of is forming task forces. We have some of them, but I think that we could even have more and utilize that as a resource to have conversations with people across the state that have communities similar to ours, as well as different ones, some like Ken said, directly on the river, that have firsthand experience with flooding and things like that, and have these conversations, have and not just legislators, have experts in these spaces come together, have the decision-making process that involves all applicable parties, and really come up with solutions that tackle these issues. And I think that task forces are a great way to accomplish that.
Okay, thank you very much. And the next question, you Do you consider yourself a progressive Democrat, an establishment Democrat, or do you not define yourself in those terms?
I would say I don't define myself in those terms. I believe in progressive policies and I agree with progressive ideals, but I am someone who doesn't think that you need a defining label on anything. I think that that's one of the important things as a legislator too, is to not just attach yourself to one particular thing, because your job as a legislator is to listen to your community and then lead. And be proactive in that way. So I personally find myself aligning more with progressive ideology, but I know that there's instances where you need to listen to your community. I am not put in office just to represent people that vote for me, just to represent Democrats, and I need to make sure that I'm doing the best job I can to support the needs of everyone in the community. So I wouldn't label myself as a progressive Democrat. Very proud of Democrat, but not progressive.
Okay, Ken?
All my life, the left-wing people in my life have accused me of being a right-winger, and the right-wing people in my life have accused me of being a left-winger. So I'm somewhere in the middle there, and I'm happy to be there. I would consider myself, I guess, a progressive in that right now progressive means we support equal rights. We support voting rights and voting access, reproductive rights, green transition, racial justice. I mean, in this country right now, if you accept that climate change is real, that makes you a radical progressive, apparently, to some people. So that's where I also position myself. I've worked in the establishment. I've worked in the Assembly and the Senate for the executive branch. I think that having a tension between the left wing and the establishment wing of the Democratic Party is what makes the Democratic Party good. I am a big tent Democrat. I still am. We see what's going on with the other party. They're trying to remove any sense of moderation, any sense of thoughtfulness, and I don't want that to be from the Democrats, no offense.
You just offended me.
I'm sorry.
We're nonpartisan here.
Okay, so anyway, that's my answer.
Okay, the next question is, even though Democrats hold a supermajority in the Assembly, do you see value in reaching across the aisle to work with Republicans and conservatives in crafting legislation?
Yes, especially in this area. We have a Republican in the Senate who has been there for a while. This area is a very purple area, I think. Working across the aisle is something, as I said, I've done my whole life, and I continue to do that. I will continue to do that in the legislature. You can't just talk down and say, this is the way it's going to be. You have to engage with people of different persuasions, of backgrounds, and political thought. And that's something I've done my whole life. I apologize for offending you. I did not mean to offend you. But, I mean, I would love to see a real robust multi-party system in which we can have a good tension, and I think good public policy comes from the tension and the back and forth. I think we've both seen that up front every day in the legislature, and that's something that I plan on doing.
Okay, thank you very much. And Lloyd?
So I currently work very frequently across the aisle with the Republican members as well, and I think that's something that is critically important of any legislator. You have to be able to have conversations. You have to be able to have tough conversations with people who don't always agree with you. But one of the things I think that's important to keep in mind is that we, at the end of the day, we're all human beings. We all have some very similar core values that we can agree to after some conversation. So I think sometimes that's what it takes, is just having those open, honest, transparent conversations, particularly with people who don't agree with you, because sometimes you may learn something, you may be able to teach something, and I think that's really, really important, especially as a legislator, because it shouldn't just be my way or the highway. You should be able to have these conversations with people and learn, and also sometimes it just takes having those conversations to have someone reframe their way of thinking. Like when I worked on universal school meals, we were having conversations with Republican Assembly members who felt that it was a bailout for schools, and schools already get too much money, and we're paying for wealthy kids to have free lunch, and that's not okay. But when you break it down and you explained it, and you explained the stigma, and you explained the cost savings, that it was almost like a tax break to these families and money back in their pocket that then goes into the economy, some of them are like, oh wow, I don't know why I don't support that. Thank you for explaining it to me in that way. And that's the kind of legislator that I would be, to make sure that we are having those conversations and that there is discussion and real work getting done across the aisle.
Am I able to add on?
Sure.
I just want to add on to something Chloe said. You talked about some of the people who pushed back on the universal meals and said, well, we're giving bailouts to the rich kids. Something I've seen throughout the district is what people call hidden poverty. It's not really hidden, it's right there. Bethlehem is considered, a moderately wealthy district. Their backpack weekend program that they send food home is extremely popular and utilized. I believe other schools in the district do that. So when people push back and say that you're just helping the wealthy, that drives me nuts, because there are needs in all the towns in our district, and that's something that I will make sure people in Albany understand.
Okay, thank you. Alrighty, the next question. How do you plan to balance the policy interests of your largely rural district with policy interests of urban and suburban New Yorkers?
I think one of the things I've learned doing doors and being in the community is that there's a lot of similar needs regardless of where you live. I know in some aspects in rural communities, farming is going to be more of a concern than in suburban areas, but there's farms in Bethlehem as well. So those are things that you can have, like that commonality that will help drive policy making. But also the committees that I want to be on, I think will address a lot of the need in the district as well. So I would love to be on healthcare. Healthcare is a universal thing that we see across the district. And it's not unique to rural areas to have access and have inability to access healthcare. We see that with the potential Burdett Birthing Center closure that's in downtown Troy, that impacts Rensselaer County as a whole. So it's not just rural issues and suburban issues. The issues that we talk about on doors are not unique to one particular community. So I would be a strong supporter of policies that would benefit the communities as a whole.
And I view the question a little bit broader in terms of the whole legislature, which is clearly dominated by New York City legislators. But I agree with Chloe that the issues that we deal with in a more rural district compared to a more urban district are different, but they're very similar. There's, like I said, the people are just trying to live their lives, and there's issues of education and transportation and jobs and economic development and the green transition. People are a little confused about what that means, how that's going to impact them. And I see all the time press conferences in Albany on the staircase, and it drives me nuts when I only see city representatives at one or upstate representatives at another, and they're talking about hunger or school education. And I think there's more crossover than people might think. And like we said in the previous question, I plan on working not only with conservatives, but with the more progressive downstate interests as well. Because I think that clearly, to be a realist, you have to work within the system, and the system is heavily dominated by downstate.
Okay, and I think this is probably going to be the last question we have time for before the closing statements. If the New York State budget starts to run up deficits, in what areas would you cut spending? Or would you raise taxes, or what? And the first person for that would be Ken.
If we have a deficit year, which every few years we're threatened with, The area I wouldn't cut clearly is any of it. No, I'm kidding. That's a hard question, and I think it's something. I think that's part of the process here is why we need good Democrats, good elected officials to be at the table to advocate for the issues. I think I've told you the issues that I will, push hard for in education and health. Am I against a billionaire's tax? No way. I think the billionaires can afford another tax. I've been working in the New York State government for 20 years, and it comes up every now and then, and they say the same thing. The billionaires are gonna leave. They never leave. New York City's there, they're gonna be there. When I was in the assembly, the Yankees took millions and millions and millions of dollars in public funding to build their stadium, and they said, well, we're gonna leave. They weren't gonna leave. Same with the Buffalo Bills. So areas I would cut are grants to Buffalo Bills, grants to New York Yankees, grants to sports teams. And quite frankly, there's a question right now, and I'm gonna use this, on the table about congestion pricing. I support congestion pricing, and while we're not in the MTA district, I think it's an important, vital program, and I'm disappointed that the governor did this. But now there's a question of $1 billion. We're gonna find $1 billion, and we're told all the time, well, you can't do funding outside of the budget. Well, here we are in June, and they're gonna find $1 billion. Well, what about that 70 million for the school meals, that 0.1% for the school meals? You're telling me that this $1 billion is more important? And some will say yes. I would say no. And I think that's the tension. That's what the great thing is about the legislative process. It's not pretty, but it's something I'd like to engage on. And so, the question is, where would I cut? Cut the fat. Raise the taxes on the billionaires.
What's the congestion? What is the congestion?
Oh, congestion pricing is a pricing scheme that would require cars during a certain time period entering Manhattan to pay $15. I think that there's different tiers throughout the day, depending on trucks and whatnot. It was passed years ago, it was being implemented as of, I think, July 1st. And yesterday, 2 days ago, the governor said, I'm gonna cancel it. There was political pressure, and it's created a whole problem. If you have to do the politics, if the governor had to do that, she should have done that a long time ago and not 2 weeks beforehand. And now they're looking for billions of dollars.
Chloe?
I agree that it's you'd be hard pressed to find anything in the budget that you would want to cut, specifically when we see, like I said, with universal school meals, that is 0.1% of the budget, and they could not find the total altogether was $90 million, and they just couldn't find it. And that's disheartening, and it's something that, as an advocate for nonprofits, I frequently encounter in my conversations with legislators, where they're like, there are so many good issues, and everyone says it's just a small drop in the bucket, but when everyone says that, it adds up. And it gets disheartening, and I think one of the solutions to that is not to cut, but instead to find other revenue raisers. And I believe that having a more progressive tax structure and taxing the ultra-rich will be not only bring some equity in terms of making sure they pay their fair share, and it's not falling on the backs of the middle class, but to make sure that we are raising those revenues to invest in these programs and make sure that there is funding available for the things that we need to get done for our communities. And then I also think there's other opportunities to have programs like the Superfund Act I mentioned earlier, in terms of making the ultra polluters pay a very, very small share of their profits to then invest back into our community. So there's ways to do it. There's ways to have creative solutions to address these problems, and the solution is not to cut spending. I don't see a way that we should ever support cutting spending in investments in terms of education, healthcare, transportation, clean energy, agriculture. The list goes on and on.
Okay, thank you very much. All righty, so, I do want to say, it's time now for the closing statements. They get 1 minute each. And the first to speak is going to be Ken.
I want to thank everybody again. I thought this was actually pretty fantastic. As I said, I want to be more engaged and active legislator than the one we have now. I think my work history working in the House of Representatives, the Assembly, the Senate, DOT, for private industry has given me a wide angle on how government is run and how we can do things better. I've been on doors, I've met a lot of people. You know, their story is my story. I know what it's like to have large student loans. I know what it's like to watch my grandmother descend into Alzheimer's disease. My dad was sick and passed away. I understand, you know, the IVF process that my wife and I needed to use, and the struggles of overcoming addiction. These are all day-to-day issues that everyone's dealing with, and I've dealt with them. I have a compassion and an empathy that I want to bring to the legislature that I think we're currently missing. So thank you again, and I hope to see you out on the campaign trail.
Thank you all so much for your time tonight and for the questions and for your interest in this race. Like Kent and I both have mentioned, this district is really, really important for the overall framework of the state, and flipping it blue would make a huge difference for these communities. And I'm so proud of the work I've already been doing as an advocate in the New York State Capitol and the results I've been able to deliver for our communities already through that work. And I know what it takes to do this job and do it well. I know how to listen and lead and how to start day one hitting the ground running. I've spent my entire professional and my personal life in government, and I know what works, I know what doesn't. I have the passion for it, I have the skill set and the experience to really deliver for these communities. So again, thank you so much for being here and for participating in the democratic process, and I look forward to seeing you out on the campaign trail and working together, no matter what happens, to really flip this seat blue in November. So thank you again.
Okay, I do want to thank everybody who is here in the audience. I want to encourage you to vote on primary day, the 25th, or beforehand, but either by mail or in early voting. And of course, you have to be registered in the Democratic Party in order to vote in this Democratic primary. The polls are going to be open on the 25th between 6 a.m. and 9 p.m. And voting information can be found on the Washington County Board of Elections website. The League also has a voter information website, vote411.org, that has questions for candidates, and both Chloe and Kent have participated in that, so you can find out more information about them and where they stand. And I think they also have campaign literature on some table here, or not? No. Okay, well. And I do indeed want to thank the audience. You were so polite and so attentive. And I did not see a single person nod off. So, congratulations, and thank you for showing up and being so respectful. And good night.